Everyone assumes international waters are an unregulated paradise where anything goes. The moment you leave land, you enter a massive legal trap filled with medieval rules and billion-dollar corporate loopholes. Prepare to discover the most absurd maritime rules that govern the high seas today. 1. A weird, legal alternate dimension opens up the second you step onto a cruise ship. Welcome to the law of the flag. If your floating buffet is registered in Panama, you are miraculously governed by Panamanian rules, even if you're drifting off the coast of Miami. Shady corporate executives aggressively exploit these flags of convenience to dodge taxes and ignore basic labor standards. 2. Robot ghost ships are currently roaming the oceans, creating a completely unhinged legal nightmare. Massive cargo freighters piloted entirely by artificial intelligence are already hitting the water. So, when a steel behemoth without a single human aboard inevitably crushes a fishing boat, who exactly gets sued? Do authorities arrest the server rack? Does the software engineer face maritime manslaughter charges? Technology is outpacing the courts at terrifying speeds. How comfortable are you sharing the open water with a billionaire's remote-controlled toy? 3. Surprise pop quizzes exist for adults, and they cost millions of dollars. Port state control allows any country to ambush a foreign vessel docked in its port with a brutal, unannounced inspection. A hardened captain can expertly navigate deadly typhoons across the globe, only to be entirely grounded by a deeply bored inspector in Amsterdam who noticed a fire extinguisher expired last Tuesday. It is a ruthless game of international gotcha. One missing piece of mundane paperwork can legally hold a billion-dollar commercial operation completely hostage for weeks. 4. Your beachfront property might legally host a very intimidating, heavily armed visitor today. Thanks to the utterly bizarre rule of innocent passage, any military warship can slice directly through another nation's territorial waters completely unchallenged. The only catch? They cannot stop fish or actively point their missile launchers at your living room. It is the geopolitical equivalent of letting a heavily armed psychopath take a shortcut through your pristine backyard, so long as he sincerely promises not to step on your prize-winning petunias. 5. Lawyers absolutely despise hovercrafts. For decades, these loud, obnoxious machines utterly broke the brains of regulators. Because they float on water but technically fly on a cushion of air, nobody knew if they were airplanes or boats. Insurance companies had epic meltdowns trying to figure out which rulebook applied during a crash. They were the maritime equivalent of a platypus, a completely bizarre, unclassifiable freak of engineering that gave government agencies such a massive migraine they eventually had to invent a brand new legal category just for them. 6. Time travel is real, and it is entirely bureaucratic. The international dateline isn't some magical geographic boundary. It is a totally arbitrary, zigzagging mess of human politics. We literally drew a drunken, jagged fence down the middle of the Pacific Ocean just so neighboring islands could agree on the current day. It wildly swerves around places like Kiribati, strictly for economic convenience. The planet couldn't care less about calendars, but we violently slice the ocean in half anyway. Have you ever thought about how time itself is basically a myth? 7. Corporate legal teams will overcomplicate absolutely anything, including wet ocean garbage. If your stuff accidentally falls overboard, it is officially flotsam. Intentionally chucking it into the sea to stop your boat from sinking transforms it into jetsam. And if you throw it over with a little floating buoy attached so you can grab it later, that is legally lagan. These aren't just silly pirate slang terms. They strictly dictate who gets to steal your ruined property. Only lawyers could invent 3 separate legal categories for finding random junk. 8. That charred NASA satellite floating near your boat is absolutely a federal trap. Under the 1967 Outer Space Treaty, any debris fired into orbit legally remains the permanent property of whatever nation launched it, forever. You cannot sell a billion-dollar booster rocket for beer money, and you definitely cannot mount a titanium thruster to the back of your dinghy. Touching space trash is a massive international offense. Just leave the glowing alien debris entirely alone. Ignore the urge to build a spaceship and stick to catching normal earthly base. 9. Finders keepers is a childish playground myth that will absolutely ruin your life on the ocean. Stumbling across an empty yacht bobbing in the waves and deciding to drive it home does not make you a clever scavenger. You are literally committing piracy. To legally claim a lucrative salvage award, you must prove you heroically rescued the vessel from actual, imminent doom. Just jumping onto a perfectly fine boat because the owner went below deck for a nap is grand theft. Navies genuinely hate this cheap trick, so seriously curb your inner Jack Sparrow. 10. Germs at sea will instantly turn your luxury vacation into a floating quarantine nightmare. Maritime infection laws are brutally unforgiving. Back in 1899, a ship hit Honolulu carrying the bubonic plague and was instantly locked down under heavily armed guard. When one desperate crewman decided to try his luck and swim for the beach, harbor police made sure he didn't make it to shore. Nobody gets on, and absolutely nobody gets off. Does that historical mess make you want to rethink booking that cheap, windowless interior cabin for your next tropical family getaway? 11. Military submarines that sink are never legally classified as wrecks. Guided by the chillingly solemn Code of the Silent Service, these lost vessels are officially designated as being on eternal patrol. Unlike standard ships, nobody is allowed to drag them up and sell the metal for scrap. Their exact coordinates are highly classified to protect them from ambitious, greedy treasure hunters. It operates as a permanent, pitch-black graveyard, ensuring that brave sailors who never made it back to port are left entirely alone in absolute peace forever. 12. International courts pulled off the smartest legal hack in naval history to crush the transatlantic slave trade. They formally redefined slavers as literal pirates. This wasn't just a moral victory, it was a ruthless bureaucratic weapon. By stripping away their national flags, slavers instantly became enemies of the entire human race. It gave British warships the ultimate green light to hunt down, board, and totally dismantle any slave ship they found, anywhere on the planet. They weaponized the universal hatred of pirates to destroy a much worse monster. 13. Humanity is accidentally deafening the entire ocean, and the laws are desperately trying to turn the volume down. The relentless, grinding roar of megaship engines and military sonar blasts is completely blinding whales, who rely heavily on sound to navigate and survive. This acoustic nightmare forced regulators to draw up mandatory quiet zones, making massive commercial freighters literally tiptoe through specific waters. Our global shipping addiction is so incredibly loud that we've essentially turned the sea into a permanent, inescapable heavy metal concert. 14. Uncle Bob's final wish to be buried at sea could easily turn you into a federal criminal. To perform a lawful ocean burial, the EPA demands hardcore compliance. The body must be aggressively weighed down so it sinks like a stone. You have to be at least 3 miles offshore, drop them into water over 600 feet deep, and officially log the exact GPS coordinates. Skipping the paperwork means you aren't honoring a beautiful memory. You are just turning a family member into a biological hazard and committing a massive, highly illegal dumping offense. 15. One rusty bolt can bankrupt a shipping empire overnight. Marine insurance companies are absolutely ruthless, wielding a brutal legal trap called the warranty of seaworthiness. The second your boat leaves the dock, you legally swear it is flawlessly safe. If the ship sinks in a massive, unpredictable storm, but an investigator later discovers your onboard bathroom had a leaky pipe before departure, the insurer can instantly void the entire policy. They don't have to pay a single dime. How is that for fine print paranoia making corporate executives sweat? 16. The ultimate government-mandated version of terrible backseat driving happens every day at sea. Under compulsory pilotage, when massive cargo ships enter a tricky port, the highly trained captain must surrender steering control to a local harbor pilot. This local supposedly knows the hidden currents, but it forces the ultimate alpha dog commander to just stand there helplessly. You literally have to bite your tongue and watch a random guy parallel park your 100,000-ton floating warehouse. How stressful is handing over your billion-dollar keys? 17. Shady shipping executives have a terrifying habit of completely abandoning their human employees. When these massive maritime companies go bankrupt, They often stop paying the crew, leaving them hopelessly stranded on rusting ships in foreign ports for years. These ghost crews are trapped in absolute legal purgatory. They cannot afford flights home, they aren't allowed to legally enter the country, and their food supplies rapidly vanish. What kind of massive penalty do you think a CEO deserves for turning a massive freighter into a floating desert island? 18. The justice system wildly pretends that inanimate boats are actual, living people who owe you cash. Under the insane principle of in rem jurisdiction, you don't sue a negligent owner. Your lawsuit will literally say, John Doe versus the giant metal boat. If the judge agrees, federal marshals will march down to the docks and physically nail an arrest warrant right into the ship's mast. You can legally drag a 100,000-ton steel object to court, demand its money, and hold it entirely hostage until it finally pays your wildly expensive, overdue maritime bill. 19. Action movie boat chases are totally legal on the ocean, but with one ridiculous catch. Under the law of hot pursuit, if the Coast Guard catches a smuggler in territorial waters, they can chase that boat all the way into the international high seas. However, the pursuit must be 100% continuous. If the police decide to slow down to eat a sandwich or lose sight of the bad guys for even 5 minutes, the chase is legally over and the criminals win. It's essentially a high-stakes, billion-dollar game of maritime tag where you absolutely cannot hit pause. 20. The romantic, open-water adventure of the past is now just a floating version of a stressful TSA checkpoint. Modern maritime security rules force every single commercial ship and port to run a suffocatingly strict, highly theatrical protocol. Crews must execute constant threat drills, fill out literal mountains of safety paperwork, and hire designated security officers. Moving a load of cheap plastic toys now requires the intense defensive strategy of a military fortress. We traded the vast freedom of the ocean for endless ID badges and locked gates. 21. Governments possess the terrifying legal power to just steal your boat because they really want it. This nightmare is called the right of Angary. If two countries are at war and your completely neutral, innocent cargo ship happens to be docked in their port, they can hijack it for the war effort. They are strictly required to write you an IOU, but they are taking your property whether you agree or not. Imagine pulling up to get gas and the military commandeers your Honda Civic to fight a battle. That is standard operating procedure on the high seas. 22. Cheap tinfoil was the global standard for wrapping toxic sludge ships until it destroyed an entire coastline. It took the catastrophic Exxon Valdez oil spill to make regulators finally mandate that all new oil tankers must have double hulls. This is basically a second layer of armor to stop catastrophic leaks if they violently crash. The terrifying part is that we waited for a historical environmental disaster before deciding to put a backup skin on the poison boats. What other horrifyingly obvious corporate safety flaws are we totally ignoring today? 23. Shipping companies can legally dodge massive bills for sunken cargo by aggressively blaming God. The Act of God loophole completely absolves corporations if an absolutely unforeseeable disaster strikes. But this triggers vicious courtroom brawls. If a captain deliberately sails directly into a massively predicted hurricane, is that divine intervention or just apocalyptic levels of human stupidity? Lawyers get paid insane money to argue the exact legal line between a freak rogue wave and a captain refusing to check the weather app. Who pays for the cargo? 24. Governments spend millions of taxpayer dollars every single year aggressively stocking frozen water. The Titanic disaster was so unbelievably embarrassing that we literally created a global neighborhood watch for angry ice cubes. The International Ice Patrol is an elite task force whose only job is to hunt down rogue icebergs in the Atlantic. They are legally mandated to track every single giant ship killer and draw a "do not cross" line on maps. All of this exists purely because one arrogant captain in 1912 thought his luxury boat was totally invincible. 25. For over a century, the entire shipping industry lost its collective mind over an imaginary corporate trophy. Awarded to the fastest passenger ship to cross the Atlantic, the Blue Ribbon offered absolutely zero prize money, just pure, concentrated corporate ego. Multi-million-dollar maritime empires blew insane amounts of cash, building outrageously dangerous, fuel-guzzling ocean liners just to shave 2 hours off a trip. They pushed technology to its absolute breaking point, risking thousands of lives for a prize that did not physically exist anywhere. 26. The CIA pulled off the most James Bond heist ever by hiding behind incredibly boring maritime paperwork. In 1974, they built a massive ship called the Glomar Explorer, claiming they were legally mining ocean rocks. In reality, Project Azorian was a wildly expensive, top-secret operation to drag up sunken enemy missiles from the ocean floor. They used international deep-sea mining regulations as the perfect cover story to completely humiliate a foreign intelligence agency. Stealing state secrets is so much easier when you weaponize bureaucratic salvage laws. 27. Accidental biological warfare is happening right now under the hull of every massive cargo ship. When freighters pump in seawater to stay balanced in Asia, they suck up millions of tiny local organisms. Dumping that water weeks later in California introduces mutant invasive species that utterly destroy the local ecosystem. Now, ruthless environmental rules force ships to chemically treat or swap their water mid-ocean. Without this incredibly strict law, every single big boat is basically a massive floating Trojan horse, smuggling tiny, ecosystem-destroying monsters. 28. Your own trusted crew completely stabbing you in the back actually has a highly specific, awesome-sounding legal name. Baratry is a maritime crime for when a captain maliciously destroys his own ship or steals the cargo just to screw over the owner. We are talking about intentionally setting the engine room on fire, smuggling dirty contraband, or deliberately sinking a multi-million-dollar vessel to collect a massive insurance payout. It is the ultimate workplace betrayal. Imagine giving an employee the keys to your business and they burn it down. 29. Criminals constantly think they have successfully outrun the authorities, only to hit a massive, invisible trapdoor. There is a weird 12-mile strip of water called the contiguous zone, sitting right outside standard territorial limits. You aren't fully in the country anymore, but Coast Guards can still violently pull you over for dodging taxes, smuggling contraband, or messing with immigration laws. Smugglers try escaping into the lawless ocean, but they instantly get clotheslined by a heavily armed patrol boat lurking in this bizarre, aquatic buffer zone. 30. The absolute coolest, most badass rule on the entire planet completely obliterates human politics. Under maritime law, if a captain hears a distress signal, they are legally and morally commanded to drop everything and help. This beautiful rule ignores corporate profits and even active war. It doesn't matter if you are a giant oil tanker or a tiny American sailboat. If someone is drowning, you go save them. Period. It is the one law proving humanity hasn't totally failed yet. Would you genuinely risk your own life to save a complete stranger out at sea? 31. Hollywood aggressively lied to you about romantic nautical weddings. Ship captains absolutely cannot legally marry you. Unless that grizzled skipper is secretly an ordained minister, a certified judge, or sailing under the weirdly specific flag of Bermuda, those vows are totally worthless pieces of paper. Thousands of people have paid for cute deckside ceremonies, only to realize years later that they were never officially hitched. If you tied the knot on a sunset booze cruise, you might want to awkwardly double-check if you are actually still single right now. 32. Politicians hate loud guitars infinitely more than they hate actual pirates. In the 1960s, rock music was practically banned in the UK, so rebel DJs anchored rusty ships in international waters to blast forbidden pop songs. The British government was so incredibly furious about kids having fun that they passed a draconian law making it a severe crime to supply, advertise on, or even give an interview to these floating jukeboxes. They aggressively killed the vibe with sheer bureaucratic force, proving that old men in suits will go to war over an electric bass riff. 33. The International Marpol Convention regulates marine garbage with terrifying OCD precision, ending the days of chucking trash overboard. Every single scrap of waste must be meticulously sorted. Worse, the captain of a billion-dollar supertanker is legally required to fill out a formal garbage record book logging exactly what happened to every trash bag. The ocean is now mostly just doing tedious chores. We took the ultimate fearless badasses of the high seas and forced them to become highly paid, heavily stressed out administrators of wet potato peels. 34. Old maritime rules violently enforced the idea that delivering a birthday card was more important than surviving a deadly hurricane. Private ships were legally forced to carry government mail if requested. If a captain refused a bag of letters or purposely delayed delivering them, they faced astronomical fines. Ships were the original internet. It didn't matter if you were hunting pirates or desperately outrunning a mythical sea monster. You were still legally obligated to make absolutely sure little Timmy got his postcards right on time no matter what. 35. Boarding a creepy, abandoned ghost ship is the maritime equivalent of hitting the billion-dollar Powerball. Legally called a derelict, an empty vessel floating adrift is a massive, dangerous hazard. But under salvage law, if you manage to tow that silent, crewless hulk safely back to port, the courts will hand you an absolutely massive cash reward, sometimes equal to the total value of the ship and all its cargo. It turns a terrifying horror movie scenario into the most insanely lucrative side hustle ever. Who wants to go ghost ship hunting this weekend? 36. A completely absurd medieval UK law from 1324 dictates that any whale or sturgeon caught near the British coast is a royal fish and legally belongs to the reigning monarch. Obviously, King Charles doesn't actually want 40 tons of rotting blubber dumped on the pristine lawn of Buckingham Palace. But the weird statute was never wiped from the books. So if you manage to hook Moby Dick off the coast of London, you aren't just a great fisherman. You are officially insulting the crown by breaking a 700-year-old rule and becoming a royal poacher. 37. A terrifying jurisdictional nightmare means serious criminals can easily walk free on the ocean. If an American commits a massive felony against a tourist on a boat registered in Liberia while sailing in international waters, who runs the trial? Technically, Liberia does. But what if that government just doesn't want to spend the money to investigate? The criminal sits in legal limbo until a country volunteers to care. It is a massive loophole in the justice system. Knowing the law is this fragile, would you ever step onto a dark cruise ship balcony at night? 38. The entire modern world is held together by incredibly fragile internet cables lying in the dirt at the pitch-black bottom of the ocean. Maritime law aggressively protects them because one wildly incompetent boat could ruin everything. Dropping an anchor in the wrong spot isn't just a clumsy accident. It is a massive international crime with catastrophic fines. You could accidentally unplug Netflix for all of France just because you wanted to fish for tuna. The fact that global communication relies on avoiding random anchors is a deeply unsettling reality. 39. Back in 1967, a British guy climbed onto an abandoned World War II sea fort in international waters and proudly declared it the sovereign principality of Sealand. He minted coins, printed fake passports, and literally shot warning rounds at the British Navy when they tried to evict him. A judge actually ruled the UK had zero jurisdiction out there, meaning he totally got away with it. It's a hilarious monument to the fact that international law completely breaks down if you just act crazy enough in open water. Anyone want to go claim a rusty piece of metal? 40. Family-friendly resorts transform into degenerate Las Vegas fever dreams thanks to an invisible, totally ridiculous geographic switch. While docked in port, cruise ship casinos are completely dead zones due to strict local gambling bans. But the absolute second that boat crosses the 12-mile mark into international waters, the slot machines miraculously power up and the cheap booze starts aggressively flowing. Gambling laws are violently territorial. You literally cross an imaginary made-up line in the ocean, and suddenly all your wholesome financial restraint vanishes. 41. Survival violently overrides all human politics when things go wrong on the water. The coolest ancient rule of the sea is force majeure, or the sacred right to safe haven. If your boat is sinking, your engine violently explodes, or someone is dying, you have the absolute legal right to bust into the nearest port, no matter what. It doesn't matter if your countries are actively bombing each other or if there are massive trade embargoes. It is a beautifully human law acknowledging that the ocean is trying to kill everyone equally, so we might as well let people park. 42. The romantic fantasy of running away to sea to completely disappear is officially dead. Every major commercial ship is legally chained to an automatic identification system, which constantly screams its exact name, speed, and location directly to satellites. The vast, mysterious, lawless ocean is now just a publicly viewable, brightly lit Google map. Anyone with a $5 smartphone app can track a Chinese mega freighter in real time. We basically put a giant, unremovable GPS ankle monitor on every single big boat on Earth, ruining all the pirate stealth. 43. Plundering an enemy ship used to be a highly organized corporate takeover, not a chaotic pirate raid. Under the ancient law of prize, a navy couldn't just steal a rival's cargo and throw a wild party. They had to drag the captured ship to a formal prize court, sit through an incredibly boring legal trial, and wait for a judge to officially condemn the boat. Only then could they legally liquidate the massive assets and cut the sailors a bonus check. It was literal state-sanctioned bureaucracy complete with its own massive oceanic human resources department. 44. Dignified retirements do not exist for multi-million-dollar cruise ships. They just get intentionally crashed into a beach in India. Welcome to the shipbreaking yards of Alang, an apocalyptic wasteland where towering metal titans are run aground at high tide. Thousands of workers then swarm the hull like angry ants, violently tearing the ship apart by hand with basic blowtorches. It completely ignores standard international waste laws, operating under its own brutal, chaotic rules just to furiously recycle cheap scrap metal from the dead, rusting behemoths of the sea. 45. The United Nations aggressively cracked down on artificial islands to stop superpowers from just paving the ocean to steal territory. The law boldly declares that man-made islands have absolutely zero legal status. They get no territorial waters, and they do not push your national borders outward. It was a noble effort to prevent countries from dumping 1 million tons of sand into the sea. But honestly, does a polite piece of paper from the UN actually stop any massive military that brought enough concrete and bulldozers to create a totally fake mountain? 46. Environmentalism driven by pure bureaucratic stupidity forced fishermen to commit massive ecological atrocities. To prevent overfishing, strict quotas were invented. But if a boat accidentally netted the wrong species, they were legally banned from keeping them and forced to shovel them back into the sea. The infuriating catch? Those fish were usually already dead from the massive nets. To comply with a rule designed to protect the ocean, crews dumped millions of tons of perfectly good, dead seafood straight into the trash. It was an absolute masterpiece of flawed logic. 47. The maritime equivalent of laying on your car horn and screaming out the window is completely codified into law. Slamming a ship's horn 5 times in a row is the official signal for "I have zero clue what you are doing, you absolute lunatic." This instantly alerts every vessel in a 5-mile radius that an imminent catastrophic collision is about to happen, because someone at the wheel is violently incompetent. The law literally gave captains a loud, universally recognized panic button to aggressively broadcast another guy's profound stupidity to the ocean. 48. Cutting-edge, unstoppable technology was once legally bullied by antique wind power. When massive, steel, coal-powered steamships first hit the ocean, the law bizarrely forced them to bow down to tiny wooden sailboats. The old rule of the road dictated that steamships always had to give right-of-way because they could maneuver easier. This led to hilariously dangerous moments where an iron behemoth had to dramatically swerve out of the way just because a guy in a rowboat with a bedsheet caught a really good breeze. It was a completely absurd era of ocean navigation. So the open ocean isn't a paradise. It's just a massive floating bureaucracy. The government can legally hijack your boat or track your every move via satellite. Knowing all of this, do you still feel safe going on a cruise? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments below. Drop a like and subscribe right now for more unbelievable laws.